You may have seen some pro players sitting with their face almost touching the screen, and even some who sit very far back from it. Right now, most of us are likely sitting at about an arm's length from screen, wondering why these players have adopted such a radical position. And that's exactly what I'll be answering throughout this video, and believe me, there is more than meets the eye with this topic. There are some significant implications for your aim, mouse sensitivity, field of view, and even your ability to clutch in stressful situations. While I'll mostly be focusing on aiming in FPS games, there are some useful findings for other genres like MOBAs and MMOs as well. The obvious variable that's being changed when moving closer or further away from the screen is the size of it in our own field of view, and subsequently the size of the targets on our screen. Depending on how you measure it, humans have about 200 degrees field of view horizontally and 135 degrees vertically. You can see this for yourself quite easily too. If you were to draw a line horizontally from your eyes, that would be 180 degrees. Yet when looking forward, you can probably see your own hand movements from just behind that line. To further put this into context, I'm currently looking at this target dummy in Apex Legends. My eyes are 65 centimeters away, and the target is 8 centimeters high and 3 centimeters wide. Before I tell you, take a quick guess as to what percentage of my field of view that this target occupies. If your initial guess was anything like mine was, then you're way off. It is only 0.069% of my field of view, if we assume it's a 2D rectangle, which it isn't, but it's close enough to get the idea. If I moved closer, so I was 20 centimeters away, it jumps up to 0.7%, so almost 1% now. And if I go even closer to 5 centimeters away, it jumps all the way up to 9.6% of my total field of view. This shows us that the perceived target size grows exponentially the closer we get to the screen. A 5 centimeter change when you're sitting back hardly changes anything, but 5 centimeters when your face is right up near the screen makes a huge difference. The other piece of this puzzle is the angle of our eye's ability to focus. We can only see things in sharp, high detail in about 1 to 2 degrees, known as foveal vision. This extends out to about 5 degrees, becoming progressively less detailed and is known as parafoveal vision. In this sheet of numbers, when looking at the 8, I can comprehend the 7, 4, 7, 1 to the right, 1, 6, 8, 8 to the left, 3 and 3 above, and 0 and 2 below. Anything past that is an educated guess. The immediate numbers, so the 7, 1, 3, and 0, are very clear, but every number past that becomes increasingly difficult to accurately see. What's interesting about this example is that it can show off how your peripheral vision is used in detecting light. When looking at the 8, I can still perceive where number 7s are, in particular because of the extra black background around it. If we go back to the Apex dummy example, this foveal vision does a good job of accurately covering the top half of it, which means I can see this target in high detail when sitting about 65 centimeters from the screen. At 10 centimeters, it moves into parafoveal and beyond. Being able to clearly see the head or even part of the chest is usually good enough for aiming purposes. That is not the conclusion though. This is just some useful groundwork to establish before moving into the in-game applications. A fascinating component of your distance to the screen is how it changes your perception of mouse sensitivity and the speed of targets moving on your screen. Check this out, and you can try this too if you like. Here I am doing some close range flicks to a target while sitting a bit under arm's length from the screen. They're consistent and I have a good idea of how far to move my mouse to close that distance. But if I suddenly move very close to my monitor, I start over-aiming the flicks. The distance between my crosshair and the target is the same, my sensitivity is identical, and despite this I am now over-aiming. What we have changed is the size of the target and the distance between it and my crosshair within my own field of vision. Because the distance appears to be larger, I feel like I have to aim further than before. The exact same thing happens if you change your field of view in-game. If I go from 105 to 80, I suddenly start over-aiming, despite having the exact same centimeters per 360. The opposite also happens when increasing field of view and or increasing the distance to the screen. You start to under-aim and feel like your sensitivity is suddenly lower. This is also why we don't use a centimeters per 360 conversion for our ADS and zoom. It may seem logical on the surface that you should move your mouse the same distance for a 360 no matter the zoom, but in practice it doesn't work. I'll quickly explain this using an example I made for a Kovacs video a while back. At 100 horizontal field of view, if we move 1 degree to the right, it will move 1/100th of the scene out of view. And at 1 horizontal field of view, if we move 1 degree, it will move 100% of the scene out of view. So even if you use the exact same centimeters per 360 for both examples, they will feel wildly different as the pixels per degree differs greatly. This is precisely why we don't use a direct centimeters per 360 conversion for scopes, as the change in pixels per degree can make them feel extremely fast in comparison. This is why scopes have sensitivity multipliers attached to them. While moving our eyes closer to the screen isn't technically changing the game's pixels per degree, the same principle applies. By moving closer, the same on-screen movements are suddenly moving objects around our scene more drastically than before, giving the appearance of things moving further and faster. You may be thinking that this sounds a bit back to front. Doesn't high field of view usually make things feel faster? Well, yes, but that's primarily because of the environment warping toward the edges. Around the center, things are just as stable as they would be on a lower field of view, and the center of the screen is what we care most about when aiming. It's getting a little outside the scope of this video, but I may as well quickly cover it here. Pros and players alike tend to play on higher fields of view when available. Most probably put this down to seeing more information, but there's more to it. Aiming feels easier on a higher field of view because of that perceived lower mouse sensitivity. You can think of it like gaining the precision benefits of low sense without incurring the physical limitations that come with playing on a low sense. For example, 35 centimeters at 110 field of view in Apex, which is equivalent to 123 horizontal field of view, is starting to feel pretty low, but in lower field of view games like Overwatch at 103 horizontal field of view, 35 centimeters feels more like a mid-range sense. To best utilize higher FOVs, you want to avoid that weird warping at the edges. Watch this. At 110 field of view and my typical screen distance, there's some warping at the edges, and I can almost see the lines here where it seems to start. If I move back, the warping gets much worse. When I'm very far back, it honestly looks atrocious. Yet if I move further forward, it all but disappears from my perception, and I can use max field of view in Apex without feeling nauseous. Alrighty, we have covered a lot of information, so hopefully you're still with me. Let's get into the practical applications of screen distance. One of the most interesting implications, in my opinion, is how the distance between your eyes and the screen changes your perception of mouse sensitivity. In particular, during tense engagements in-game, you may notice that you gradually move your head closer to the screen. What this means is that throughout this intense part of the game, you're essentially raising your mouse sensitivity and increasing the perceived speed of enemies moving around on your screen, which is the last thing you need in a time like that. And remember, this effect is exponentially stronger the closer you are to that screen. If you're sitting pretty far back, then the impact is mild, but if you're already close, moving your head forward another 20 centimeters or so can have a significant impact on your perceived sensitivity and enemy speed. This doesn't mean you shouldn't sit closer or that sitting far back is far superior, it's simply worth considering. If you find any downtime during tense moments, perhaps try to sneak in a quick posture check to get yourself back in order. In regards to being very close to the monitor, we tend to see this mostly with TAC FPS players in Counter-Strike and Valorant. In my opinion, this comes down to the structured and predictable nature of gameplay. There is limited mobility, and with proper awareness and communication, being attacked from behind or the sides isn't that common. This means players can opt to put a massive emphasis on target size and clarity. By sitting so close, enemies are very easy to see around the center of the screen, and their relative size is very large, so they can feel easier to aim at. This can work because of the fast time to kill, predictable locations of enemies, and limited need for tracking. These players are sacrificing the information in their peripheral vision for enhanced details around the center. While I can understand the potential benefits of being so close, it's not something I would personally recommend doing. The eye strain, postural issues, and reduced situational awareness don't really seem worth it to me. You should be able to achieve most of these same benefits without incurring so many drawbacks, with settling for a middle ground at around half arm's length. To find the distance that works best for you, it's important to consider that there isn't a perfect one-size-fits-all number, but we can follow some guidelines to find what works best for our own circumstances. First, what game are you playing? In my experience, playing on a 24.5-inch monitor, I tend to play most games at a bit under arm's length from the screen, which for me, with my head forward a little, is about 55 centimeters. In FPS games where enemy size is important, so battle royales like PUBG and Apex, I tend to use a closer setup around 45 to 55 centimeters. In a game like Overwatch where engagements are fairly close and targets are bright and visible, a more comfortable 55 centimeters works just fine. In MOBAs like Heroes of the Storm, where information toward the edges of the screen is very important, I find myself moving the monitor back, so I'd be playing at about 60 to 65 centimeters. Any closer and gameplay can start to feel claustrophobic, where the important edges of my screen and of battles can start to feel undefined and hard to track. The same goes for games like World of Warcraft, where UI elements provide crucial information, so being able to comfortably see the screen without needing massive eye movements is very beneficial. My recommendation would be to experiment with your distance in some throwaway games, or by watching high-resolution VODs of that game. But be careful though, if the quality is too low, you may move closer to compensate, which isn't a fair test. The idea is to experience what differences you notice and where the sweet spot between comfort and detail sits for you, keeping in mind that if you are playing the game while testing, that your perceived mouse sensitivity and target speed will be changing. So try not to judge this based on your performance alone. You're looking for the image size that feels best to look at in your game. Performance can come later. If you do end up changing your screen distance, whether that's further forward or backwards, give yourself some time to adjust to it and get comfortable with your settings again. You may want to adjust your sensitivity slightly, so if you moved closer, you could lower it, and if you moved further away, you could increase it. Not by much, you'd just be looking to make it feel the way it did before you changed that distance. And finally, your ergonomics and health matter. Sitting at a desk for hours on end is bad enough as it is, without throwing in complications from forward head posture or eye strain. So my advice is to keep that distance reasonable and sustainable. Also, try to line up your eyes with the top third of your monitor to reduce neck and eye strain. This has been a topic I've wanted to cover for a while now. There is so much nuance to it that I wanted to get into, so hopefully the information dump wasn't too much or too boring. Let me know if you'd like to see more in-depth videos like this one, or if I should try to keep them shorter and focus on the answers and conclusions. You can check out the Clawmate mouse mod I designed over at struthgaminggear.com. Video all about how it works right here. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more content like this, and I'll catch you in the next one.